Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to do a bit of a sit down video and talk about me and my diabetes, because I've started recording more daily videos and uploading them sort of thing, or vlogs, and I haven't really addressed the biggest part of my life, which is me living with type 1 diabetes. That's why in some of the videos you might see I wear a blood glucose monitor, and I also wear an insulin pump on my stomach. So I thought I'd come on here today and talk a bit about that and how I sort of found out about my diabetes and all that. So I start off probably with, and I also wanted to talk about it too, to make people familiar with it sort of thing, or, you know, give it a bit more awareness out there. You don't really hear much about it, so I thought I'd come on here and talk about it. So I've been living with diabetes for 6 years now. 6 years in December last year, and it has been non-stop. Like, I think that's sort of one thing that not many people get, is it's a very 24 hours, like 7 days a week, all year round. You never get a break. Even when you're asleep, it's still continually going. That's where, you know, you can say, oh, I've been living with it for 6 years, and people sort of think, oh, good on you, but like, it's every minute, every second, every day, you know, all that. So it all started in the Christmas holidays of 2016, when my first sign of it was I was waking up during the middle of the night a lot, and I was going to the bathroom a lot, like during the middle of the night. It was like 10 times each night, and I'd been eating a lot. Like, I'd always been starving and hungry, but like I was eating the same as everyone else or everything. But I was also like stick thin, like twig thin, right? I think I actually do have a photo of what I was like pre-diagnosis. Like, that's my legs in the background. Like, I was twig thin, right? But I'd always been sort of like that, so we never really took notice of that or anything. So I was going to the bathroom a lot in the middle of the night. I was always hungry, I was always thirsty, not putting on any weight. And we kept a record of that, and I remember I went like 10 times in one night, and I told Mum, and Mum and me booked an appointment down at our local doctor. So when we got to our GP, she sent me off for blood tests and urine tests to go get it all tested to see if I had type 1 diabetes, because even my auntie and my nan had typed up some of the symptoms for it, and I was like 4 out of 5 of the symptoms. So then it was maybe the next week, we were actually at my dad's family Christmas party, and during that time my mum got a phone call saying, like, is this Chelsea? Yes. You need to bring Ella to the Monash Children's Hospital immediately. And my mum sort of sat there a bit like, oh boy, what do you mean? You know, I think we were all a bit in shock. And then my mum went and told my dad, we've got to go to the hospital immediately, because that's what the doctors are saying, because obviously the tests have come back with something. And then, so we left that family Christmas party, and we drove to the Monash Hospital, and we went straight to the emergency, because they told us to go straight to the emergency. And I remember as soon as we got to the emergency desk, we said like, oh, we've got Ella House in here, we've been told to bring her in. So I remember getting taken straight into a room at the emergency and sitting there, and I remember just crying, because I didn't know what was happening. Like, I've gotten all these tests, I've still haven't really been sure what they're for, and then you get told to go straight to an emergency and you get put straight in the bed. And And then I remember sitting there, and these nurses were coming in, and they were taking my blood for blood tests and sending it off and stuff. And I remember thinking maybe like it is type 1 after we sort of did a bit of research on it before we sort of got there. And I remember sitting there, and then one of the nurses had come in. Meanwhile, I'm like bawling my eyes out because my biggest fear is needles. Like, I would do anything to get out of it. I would hate it. It would just like, I remember if I ever got asked to do a blood test, I'd be crying to mum the night before, like, I don't want to do it and everything. Like, I'd hate it. So after getting that blood test, I'm just bawling because I hated getting it. And I remember the nurse coming in and sitting next to me, and she literally puts her hand like on my leg and goes, "Oh darling, you've got type 1 diabetes." And I remember sitting there, and I was looking at mum and dad. Well, it's gonna make me and I remember sitting there, and I remember looking at mum and dad, and I sort of looked at them like what's she talking about? What do you mean? And everything. And she's all like, "Oh, you've been diagnosed with type 1, you've got type 1 diabetes, that's what's come back on all the blood test reports and stuff." And the rest of my family and me, we're just crying, I think, just sitting there in shock. And then that nurse sort of said like, "Oh, I'll leave you guys for a minute so, you know, you can talk and stuff amongst yourselves." And as soon as she left, I fell to pieces. The rest of my family was already in pieces. And then it's sort of funny, like looking back now at the childhood sort of like, you're straight to your thoughts. Like, I remember straight away thinking, I remember the first question I asked mum and dad was, "Am I going to die?" And it's sad to think that now, because it's like you wish you could go back and tell yourself, like, that's the stupidest thought, you know, sort of thing. So I remember thinking that, and I remember looking at mum and dad going like, "Oh my God, am I going to die? Like, could I die?" You know, sort of thing. And they were like, no, don't even think that sort of thing. But we sort of also needed, I think, that reassurance from the head doctors. So once we sat there for a while, you know, we rang up the family and said we're in hospital, Ella's been diagnosed with type 1. We then went, like the highest trained, they're called endocrinologists, who's the highest trained doctors in diabetes. She came in and she talked to us, because like we've been told I've got type 1 diabetes, but we had no clue what it is or anything. And sort of, we also didn't know the differences. Like, you hear of diabetes, but there's so many different branches of it. Like, there's the pregnancy diabetes, there's type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you know, all of that. So type 1 diabetes is my pancreas has died, and what the pancreas does is it releases insulin, which controls your blood sugar levels. Where someone with type 2 diabetes, it says here that the pancreas still produces insulin but is unable to use it efficiently, or the body has developed a resistance to it. So there is a difference with it, because I know a lot of people put type 1 and type 2 together, but they are two completely different, like immune diseases. They're under the one branch of diabetes, but they're two completely different things. And another nurse comes in and tells me that I've got to start finger pricking my fingers for testing my blood sugar, and I've got to start having 4 injections a day. And as soon as I've heard that, I'm like in a freak out. I'm like, I hate getting one blood test, you know, every few months. How am I going to deal with 4 needles a day, you know, injecting myself with this insulin that my body can't produce itself? and everything. So then I'm trying to get in that thing. Then she sort of like would tell my parents that and stuff, because I'm in a fog, like I'm not really taking anything in. And basically after the emergency room, they took me up to like a children's ward, and I stayed there with mum the night, just sort of, I think, getting, you know, through the process of all of that. And then the next morning, it was like full steam ahead. I remember a nurse coming in the morning, and she literally, I remember getting like a schedule on a piece of paper, and she basically told me that in the morning I would have a nurse come in giving me all my new supplies and equipment that I'd have to deal with daily and use daily. Then I was going to go see a psychologist, then I was going to go see a dietitian, and then a nurse, I think. And then hopefully I'd be like discharged in the afternoon, which I was just praying I purely wanted to be discharged from, like, you know, that morning and everything. So first thing that happened when we woke up is a nurse came in, and she was lovely, this nurse. I remember her coming in, and she was just, you know, all like, oh, how are you guys coping with the news? Are you alright and everything? And I remember her telling me that she actually had like the pregnancy diabetes when she was pregnant. So you sort of felt like comfortable with someone else saying they'd sort of been through the same similar things. So basically when she came in, she gave me all this new like equipment that I'd be using, which I'm sure some people have probably seen before. So you've all probably seen basically this before, but this is a finger pricker. So basically what you get given is you get given a finger pricker, which has a needle in it. You get given a little monitor, which you put the strips into, which collects the blood and then tell you your blood sugars. So you get given that when you get diagnosed, and trust me, 6 years later, you're still using it. Like, I've got the blood glucose monitor on now, which is a life changer, but you'll always and still forever need your finger pricker. Then you get given your insulin pens, which at the start I was on insulin pens, now I'm on an insulin pump. But basically the insulin pens carry the insulin in it, and then you put a needle on the top, and you figure out, like, another big thing is your eating and your carbs. So you've got to figure out like how many carbs you're eating, what's your blood sugar level, and then you got to have however many units depending on the carbs and the correction you need to control your blood sugar levels. So it's all a bit of a, you know, big head spin, but whatever. So you get given 2 pens. You get given 1 pen which is your fast acting insulin, and then which basically you'll have anytime you eat. And then you'll also get given your long-acting insulin, which acts as a background insulin to sort of control your numbers throughout the night or day, right? So those, and you also get given a logbook, which basically every time you ate or pricked your finger, you had to put it in here, and then all your insulin, and you have to figure all that out and stuff. Another thing that you get taught is, because they also talk about having, so when you're at the hospital and you have the appointments with the nurses, they also talk about highs and lows in diabetes. So a high is basically when your blood sugars are too high and you need to bring them down, which when you're having a high, you can have symptoms of like sweating, you can get emotional, you can get angry, you can get shaky and stuff like that, because your blood sugar levels are meant to be between 4 and 8, which honestly can be really hard sometimes, and still 6 years on, I'm still struggling sometimes to get it in between that. So you are going to have days when you're high, or you're going to have days when you're low, and basically a low blood sugar, you can have like blurry vision, slurred speech, you can have the sweats, you can be shaky, you can, you know, it can be hard to think sometimes. Sometimes I can be sitting in a low, and I'll just say to like mum or dad that like, I know you guys are talking to me, but like it's taking me a process to answer it, because it's just like, because you got no energy, you just like, it's hard to think, you know, sort of thing. So when you're in there, you get told about having a glucose pen or a hypo kit. I haven't ever used one of these in my 6 years, but basically you get given this, and this is for if you have a really bad low in the fact of that you're so low that you actually pass out and sort of become a bit unconscious, or you have slurred speech and you're not able enough to take in the sugars that you need. You basically get given this glucagon, which is a needle and pretty much this little vial, which purely has just a sugar tablet in it. So this is another thing when you get diagnosed, you're already sort of in such a headspace, and then they sort of tell you stuff like this, which to me was frightening, and to my parents and family this was frightening, thinking that something could happen where I pass out and, you know, you need to go into that immediate emergency sort of first aid thing. So basically, if I ever did, this syringe comes with like a water or a gel in it, and you basically put it in this little vial which has like a sugar tablet in it, shake it up, and they'll inject it into my leg. And that sugar should start working within like 2 minutes or a minute, I think. But you also are encouraged to call the ambulance, because then once you've had that, it's sort of like all the adrenaline, and you know, there's probably a lot of sugar in that, so you would be admitted into hospital once that happens. But so that's another big thing that you get told, which sort of freaks everyone out a bit, but you know, you sort of probably get used to that over the years. And it's like me, in the 6 years I haven't ever used one, so I've never gone into that bad of a state of a low. Already being told when you're at the hospital you've been diagnosed, and then sort of getting given all these new things, which it was honestly brain numbing for the first bit. Now it's like the back of your hand, but looking back and everything. So she came in, gave me all that equipment, she was lovely. Then I remember going to the psychologist, which is sort of a weird thing, because I remember going in there and she's all like, oh, you know, like, because the biggest thing with type 1s is there's something called diabetic fog, which is, because it's such a day in, day out, 24/7 thing, you can become mentally like a fog, and everything just, like, you just lose everything. And yeah, like, I remember it, and I still get it now. Like, you wake up some mornings and you're just like, I don't even want to get out of bed because I don't want my numbers moving and going low and then having to deal with it. You just get so like brain numbed by it, I suppose. And yeah, so it can still be really hard some mornings, and you're just like, oh, I can't do another finger prick, or I can't calculate these carbs or do this insulin anymore, you know. It still is like that 6 years on, like, so it's just as hard sometimes, I find it, as day one. I sometimes look back now and I probably think it was easier back then than it has been these few next years. And I've also found that I've probably been more sicker going on the years. Like, the first few years, your body's getting used to insulin, you're putting that weight back on that you should have, and you know, stuff's all getting healthier like that, and you feel alright. But it's probably later on down, some of those mistakes that you made, you know, 4-3 years ago, it's like they're coming back at you now, sort of thing. Like, yeah, so I probably had more hospital visits or emergency visits these 6 years on than I did at the beginning of the sort of my type 1 diagnosis. So basically, then you go to the psychologist, she talks to you, she's like, how are you feeling? Obviously you're like, I feel terrible, I don't want this to happen, why is this happening to me, you know. Usually sometimes people are like, oh, well, is there other people in the family because it's passed it on? And I'm like, no, I'm like this beginner of the family, you know, first one in the family and everything and all that. And then you sort of go on that path of, oh, well, you know, it can be genetic and your kids can get it, your sister's kids are more likely to get it, and I'm just like, oh God, I'm just the start of this like mental big issue that can be passed on to the family and stuff like that. So then, and then after the psychologist, you talk about that, you go to the nurse, she just basically tells you more about all the insulin and your carbs and your numbers and stuff like that. And then I do actually remember one funny memory when I was in the hospital was after I'd had all my appointments and stuff. I remember the nurses coming around saying, oh, there's going to be like these special people coming around and they're going to like greet the kids or meet the kids and stuff. And I'm sitting there still like grieving about having this type 1 and mentally getting through it. And this Melbourne soccer team comes in and they gave us all jerseys and water bottles and presents, and then this clown guy comes in with a dog, and I remember at the time thinking like, dude, I don't want to see your dog, I don't want you here, like just go away. And then like these arts and craft ladies come in, like the hospital always had good uplifting stuff like that, I suppose, when, you know, we're not really in a good time mentally. But and then I remember that night them bringing around the dinner, and I ate the dinner, and I was still, it's sort of funny because I remember not really wanting to eat because I thought if I don't eat then I don't have to inject and I don't have the needle, right, and everything, which thinking back now is just stupid, like, because, you know, you're going to have it for the rest of your life. And I don't think that goes through your head until a few years later, and you're like, oh no, like literally this is not going away, this is day in, day out, you know, 24 hours and stuff, and all that. So then I remember getting discharged from the hospital, and I remember going home that night and just sort of thinking like, this is so weird. It's sort of like you're in the hospital and you've been told you've been diagnosed with this, but then it's like, oh, you go home and just live with it and stuff like that sort of thing. So it was all sort of weird. But during those next few months, you're in and out, like driving to appointments day in, day out, getting your numbers fixed and your numbers checked and all that. Anyway, so that was all down there in Melbourne for like 2 years straight, I think. And then me and my family, we moved up here to northern New South Wales. So getting all my medical stuff changed from Monash Children's to Tweed Heads Hospital and all that. And their nurses and doctors are great up there and everything, and that all went really well. Their nurses and doctors are great and everything, and that all went all well. And then when I was up there, they were telling me all about the new technology that diabetes and NDSS and AMSL have all gotten around and with and stuff. So I was like, oh, I'm really interested in that. Anything that can make my life easier, because life's already hard enough and you already got to do all this stuff in there, and then I've got diabetes on top of that. So I'm like, anything that will make it easier, I'm willing to do, willing to try, let's just do it. So the first thing I tried was the blood glucose monitor, which at the start, I remember thinking like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Because basically it comes with this. This is the applicator, and basically you put the applicator on your arm, you press the little orange button, and it makes a really loud click sound, and that click is the needle puncturing in and leaving sort of, it's probably like, you know, a little bit of tinsel that stays in your arm and continually collects that blood and sends the data to my pump or phone. So basically the sensor is Bluetooth, and it Bluetooths to my phone to send all my readings, and it also Bluetooths to my pump, which is so much better because I don't have to finger prick and put in my blood sugar reading. It just is automatically on my pump. And then that all went in, that was all really good, that was all fine. I think I do actually have a clip of when I first got my sensor in, which I used to wear on my stomach, which I can put in here.
And now at no point I want you to touch that plunger until you're good and ready. So pop your 2 fingers on top of the collar, it's called a collar, and then 1, 2, 3, push on the plunger, but I want you to press on it racing car fast and go all the way down to the bottom to here, until you can't go any further. That's perfect. Now move these 2 fingers, that's the hardest part, towards you, and it'll just rock off. Lovely. Done.
That was awesome.
That's fantastic.
And then probably a year after that, I learned about insulin pump and all that. So basically, the insulin pump is this little device that reads my blood sugars and allows me to send insulin through this. So this has something called a cartridge in it, which stores all the insulin, which I do have to change my pump every 3 days and my sensor every 10 days. But the pump comes with the pump, the cartridges, which hold the insulin. This is the tubing that then connects to this first sticker, which is basically, if I ever drop my pump out of my pocket, it's going to most likely pull on that sticker. Then it is this next sticker, which is where the needle is. The needle probably is like, it's not that long, but that sits in my stomach and under my skin, which then delivers the insulin through and into that. And I remember thinking at the start when I got all this, I was like, oh my God, like now is it better to have diabetes and not sort of show it or carry it sort of thing? Or is it better to have all this electronical sort of diabetes wear, but it be showing on me sort of thing? Because I never wanted to walk around having like diabetes written on my forehead, sort of thing. You don't want your life to be revolved around diabetes sort of thing, but it is. And everything, and the more I've had it on, the more it doesn't faze me at all. It definitely got me used to, I had to get used to carrying my pump in my pocket. It's something like always having in your pocket, or having my sensor on my stomach, but it's you sort of figure out ways around it. Like now that I have my sensor on the back of my arm, because I don't see it probably, it doesn't even bother me at all, right? And having my pump on my stomach, I'm so used to that now. I wear tops like this all the time that show it, and I wear like shorts and stuff with it all the time, but that doesn't even faze me anymore. I still sometimes, you go around the shops and you get the people there's sort of 2 different types of people. There's the people that look at it and are a bit like looking at it like, you shouldn't have that on, or why do you have that on? But then there's also some people that will look at it and then they'll look at you and they'll give you the most sympathetic smile that you'll ever receive. And I always find that quite funny, and it's usually kids who give you that little sympathetic smile and stuff. But definitely that's just a part of it, but it's a part of me. I can't change it, I can't take it away. You just got to deal with it sort of thing. So basically then once we've lived up here, I've just been going about life, and this has been 6 years on, sort of thing from when I got diagnosed. So you just probably gotta, I guess live life, the hardest thing is not letting it stop you sort of thing. Like if I'm having breakfast and I know I'm going out for a walk or doing exercise, I might not just give as much insulin in the morning, so then I don't go low, It's just sort of things like that I guess you got to wrap your head around. But I just sort of wanted to come on here, share my diabetes story, because I know there are plenty out there and everyone's are so different, and I do like listening to other people's stories, and also probably just giving a bit of awareness to it, or bringing a bit of light to it, because you don't really hear much about it and stuff like that. So that's basically my little diabetes story of me. Another thing that I thought I'd do is, there's always questions revolved around diabetes, so I thought I'd answer a few of the funny ones. The first one that people usually say is, I have type 1 diabetes, are my children at risk? And this was something that I talked about just before, but basically type 1 diabetes is a genetic disease, and it might not happen, but most likely, because I've got it in the family, it will carry on and go down the family. It might not go through my children, my sister's children, but it might go through like my cousin's children, or might go through my children, my sister's children and stuff like that. So because it is a genetic, it will end up somewhere else down the family tree and stuff like that. Do you need to take insulin for the rest of your life? Now, as a type 1 diabetic, I will need to take insulin for the rest of my life unless somehow a miracle comes along and there's a cure, or you can somehow do like a pancreas transplant where you get someone else's pancreas and maybe they do that through a surgery, I don't know. But basically, me as a type 1, I will need to take insulin for the rest of my life until, well, forever, yeah. So basically, I will need to take insulin for the rest of my life. What can you eat with type 1 diabetes? This is something that most people say, because sometimes it's like, oh, can you eat that? It's got too much sugar in it, or, oh no, I didn't get you the non-sugar one, or stuff like that. Basically, as a type 1, you know what you can and can't eat, but you can eat anything. I can eat everything and everything that anyone else can eat. I've just got to dose for it with insulin to be able to cover myself off rather than just like grabbing it and eating it. But basically, I can eat anything. And even like Halloween, people talk a lot about Halloween because they're like, can you have that much sugar and stuff? I can eat as much sugar as I can, but you know, you just probably choose not to because you'd rather not deal with it than having to sit there and deal with it, sort of thing, you know. Next one everyone usually says is like, oh my God, you're so brave. I could never do that. How can you do that? You know, does it hurt and stuff like that? The number one thing, I can't speak for other type 1ers, but something that sort of, it doesn't like kill me, but it just sort of makes, you know, it sort of annoys me a little, is when people are probably like, you're so brave, oh my God, I could never do that, how do you do that? Because I don't want to do it, I'm not choosing to do it, I've just got to do it to really keep myself alive or keep going, sort of thing. I'm not yet, if I could have any day of my life where I do not have it, or could wake up one morning and it completely disappear, I would like want to go to that day straight away immediately, because I can tell you it's exhausting. I don't want to live with it, I don't want to do it and stuff like this. And when people say, does it hurt? Of course things hurt, you're having needles sort of put in you all the time, but I do feel like, to a sense, that where I mostly have my needles, like my stomach or my arms, or even my fingers for finger pricking, I do feel like almost like the skin around it has gone numb, because sometimes I could be, or mum could be putting my insulin needle in, or, you know, my sensor, and I almost not even feel it, which is sort of a weird thing, because you know, you're thinking like a needle going into skin, you're going to feel that little pinch or sting or stuff, but sometimes I can't feel it, and I swear it's because my skin's just gone numb around it, sort of thing. The next one that I do get usually, or I know that other people with type 1 out there will definitely relate to this, is when people say like, oh, my grandmother's sister's, you know, dog had type 1 diabetes, I've heard of it, or I know how you feel, or sort of thing. Completely, my diabetes is different to your diabetes, is different to theirs. Everyone, we all have something called type 1 diabetes, but it's so different for everyone that my diabetes isn't the same as anyone else's, or theirs isn't the same as mine, sort of thing. Like, I know they're just saying it out of like being nice, sort of like a nice comment sort of thing, which definitely, when people say, oh, like I've got it, or my brother has it, you do sort of have a bit of a relief, because you're just like, you don't have to explain, I guess, the whole thing of it, sort of thing. But yeah, that's probably the only thing with me, and that is my diabetes is different from theirs and theirs is different from mine, sort of thing. But yeah, I do understand that they're saying it out of a nice. So basically, that's my little sit-down video, I guess, about me and my diabetes, or just type 1 diabetes as a general. I hope you guys liked that video. Make sure you like, subscribe and comment any questions or any other videos that you would want to see from me. Thanks so much for watching, guys.